set, secure. Automation and orchestration, endpoint detection and response, network visibility, cloud, containers, DevSecOps, threat intelligence, security platforms. Wondering how to keep up with all the latest security products and trends while still keeping your organization safe? Then stick around to listen to Ready, Set, Secure, the SET Solutions Podcast.
And hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 55 of the SET Solutions Podcast, Ready, Set, Secure, a SET Solutions podcast. As usual, my name is Michael Farnham, CTO with SET Solutions, and joining us, as usual, Greg Porterfield, Senior Security Consultant. I don't know why I had to look at my notes. I knew that.
It's not like we've done this.
It's not like we've done this a million times. What's your name again? Greg Porterfield.
That's the one.
All right. Hey, man, how you doing?
Good. I'm happy to be inside. I was doing yard work all weekend.
Oh, gosh. No, thank you.
No, it wasn't fun.
No, thank you. No.
Productive, but not fun.
Yeah, well, at least you got it done before all the rain comes in, because it's going to be bad, I think. Well, we're here together in the studios, and joining us in a secret bunker somewhere is Don Shin, Director of Product Marketing at Secret Double Octopus. I always have trouble getting that all out in one thing. How you doing, Don?
I'm doing great. You know, that name is a little bit of a tongue twister, but it has people love it because they think, what the heck is that? You know, so it's a good leader.
It captures you really fast. The first time I heard it, I was like, okay, got to know what these guys do. So SDO, I sometimes call it, just so I don't have to do the tongue twister. I don't know if y'all say that internally or if your marketing team likes that.
So our company is Secret Double Octopus, but the way that we talk about our product is the Octopus. So
yep, that makes sense. All right. Well, thank you for joining. We will we'll be talking all things passwordless and critical infrastructure and the problems that are going on in there with access. We'll be talking about that in the main segment. So thank you for joining us. Appreciate that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. So we will jump into the SET Solutions segment real quick. Not a whole lot to talk about. I think we talked about this last week. Our Director of Research and Development, Justin Hutchins, a.k.a. Hutch, is going to be presenting at RSA. If you have a chance to go see that talk, he's doing, I think, 2 talks. He's doing his main talk, and then he's doing a birds of a feather type of a session with a bunch of security leaders. It's all going to be around artificial intelligence and all the things that are happening these days in it. He's been talking about that for a while, been doing a bunch of talks on that for, I think the last 10 years or something. And now with these new developments, obviously it's adding a whole nother piece to his talk. So very interested in seeing that one. And then on May 5th up in Dallas, we are having our annual golf tournament. So if you are interested in golf, want to come up there, we'll have a lot of good vendors up there to talk to, but more importantly, sorry, Don, we will be having good golf. It's always a good time up in Dallas for the golf tournament. So if you want to join that, doesn't matter if you're in Dallas, doesn't matter if Houston, doesn't matter where you are. If you want to come down, let us know, talk to your account manager and get in on that, because it's going to be a lot of fun. It's always a good time up there. Okay. That's SET Solution segments. Now we'll get into news. So Don, we're going to go into your article specifically. So you gave us, and I think that's the only one we're going to do for our news segment, because it just goes right into what we want to talk about in the main segment. But your article is all around FBI and CISA investigating a cyber attack on Puerto Rico's water authority, which just like last week, I think, happened, or a week before last. So why don't you talk about your take on it, give us kind of a summary, and then we'll do a little discussion.
Yeah. So when the article came out last week, and it was, in particular, it was a record that broke the story. And, you know, the ransomware portion of it is not really that particularly interesting, because it's ransomware. I think we've gotten kind of numb to the everything being ransomware in every industry and whatnot. But what was really fascinating to me was the core of what was being ransomed: water and waste treatment, right? So fundamental to our lives. And then the other portion of it really that comes into play is that 2 weeks prior to that, the EPA had issued a decree, a presidential decree around how these treatment plants had to adopt a cybersecurity program and the requirements associated with it, and the reference points inside of it, and all of it was specifically because of the fact that water treatment, right? And just prior to that, in 2021, there was that incident in San Francisco where attackers had gotten in, were trying to mix poisons into the water, right? And it was a little unclear if that was really the motive or if that was sort of the outcome of it. But you just see these industries that that are sort of supposed to be hands off, right? Don't touch these industries, right? and yet, of course, they're going to go after those industries.
Yeah, it's weird how laws don't keep people from doing things.
Weird how that works.
It's really weird, almost like they're doing it on purpose. Yeah, I mean, I thought this one was interesting. Yeah, I know it was, 2 years ago when the one in Tampa, which I still contend that they were trying to go after Tom Brady because the Super Bowl was happening that year. But I think that's the third or fourth time on this podcast
in
I've
a row.
About that.
We have hit that topic for 3 runs.
Hey, man, it's an important topic. Football. No, it really. I mean, that one they were actively going against the water treatment. The other ones have gone after water treatment. This one I don't know if they were trying to pivot, but it went after them. They had the employee data and that kind of stuff that they got, and they say in the article that the agency there said that they had network segmentation in place and it kept it from pivoting. It doesn't say that they were trying to pivot. It doesn't say that they haven't. I mean, essentially, they haven't found anything in their actual water treatment itself. It stopped here. Does that mean they were going after it? Does that mean they were just trying to ransom that information that they got? Because that's kind of their go-to, right? They grab. It's not even like ransomware specifically. It's ransoming, getting the info, ransoming it, and then asking you for money to get it back.
Right.
It didn't necessarily lock up. So it's an interesting type of issue that it's a little bit different than what the normal going after a water treatment plant and trying to shut that down or trying to get whatever kind of poison in it or fluoride or whatever.
I think it grabs the headline, and it's a good headline. For all the reasons that are good and also some that are not so great. It's Puerto Rico. It's not just a state. They're not a state. They're just territory of the United States. But it sounds bigger than, hey, we went after Delaware or whatever. And also,
wow, you just insulted Delaware.
I mean, who's from Delaware? Nobody important, right?
Wow. I'm sorry to any of our watchers, viewers, listeners from Delaware.
Who might also be the president.
We like you a lot.
Okay. Delaware's great, but it's a little state. Puerto Rico sounds good. They're talking about the water authority. It's not just a treatment plant. It's not something, out in the middle of because what's outside of Tampa? Nothing.
We're just insulting cities and states.
It's Everglades. I've been there a lot. It's a good headline, but the whole point is it all pretty much targets our targets. They are either lacking in security, something got them through their front door. This is an organized element that knows what they're looking for. They're going to do the same thing over and over again. So it's not against Puerto Rico. It's not against their water authority. It's really everybody. If you have something that's sitting on the network, the internet, lock it down now. There's no more grace period. We haven't had a grace period for years. It's really just a thing of anybody who has left something open, the door is about to get kicked in by one or more cyber groups. And that's the reality. So now we have the organizations that are kind of mandating it, whether it's CISA, the EPA, the governments, wherever. They're saying, okay, enough is enough. We got to do something about it. You're not doing it on your own for whatever reason. So now we have to regulate this and you must comply.
Because it always comes down to a business decision, right? And regulation can absolutely drive a business decision. And they're doing it, in my view, I think a lot of people would agree with this, in the right way, the same way we would do a risk assessment. What's the most important things on your network that you need to worry about? Water treatment plants are a pretty big deal. Critical infrastructure, moving fuel around, those kind of things. That's a big deal. You need to be controlling those. So we've done the right risk management if we're going to put regulations out there. I know we've got customers that are in industries adjacent to that aren't critical infrastructure, but have decided that, hey, these things are going to come down.
Mm-hmm.
Might as well just get some of this stuff down and comply with these now, so we don't have to worry about it later on. So I think the regulations are absolutely having a great effect to some degree, but I think the only way to prove it out, whether they're working and to keep people moving, is to have stuff like this continue to have it. I hate it, but you start making decisions based on getting popped pretty quickly. So, well, Don, thank you for the article. It's a very important thing we've got to talk through. I really do think it's a great segue though into our main segment, because critical infrastructure is kind of what we wanted to talk about and in being able to access it. So let's take the Tampa one, for instance. That was a team viewer. I think they had set up. So they had something set up to be able to access that environment remotely. I should have gone back and done the research and think about it, but I don't know how well they were segmented out across, because you can be extremely segmented and have all of the layers in the world you want to keep people from accessing all of that and, directly. So have your zones built out. But if you've got something like TeamViewer sitting on your network,
it doesn't really matter.
Doesn't really matter, right? You're going to get access into it. So, but it brings up the point, Don, that the accessing those environments, because you still got to access them. You still got to do business. You still got to get in there and make changes to the controls. So it's a challenge to get to them. So how do you kind of frame that when you're talking to your customers about critical infrastructure? Because I know SDO does work in here, but kind of when you're educating your customer, not talking product, but educating your customer, how do you talk about that from accessing critical infrastructure?
Yeah, absolutely. That, and that's a great example of it with, part of the issue for critical infrastructure is sort of the nature of it. A lot of times we think of businesses and IT as sort of a monolith, but the reality in critical infrastructure is not, right? Is that most of that equipment in many of the factories or processing plants are actually managed by the vendor technicians, right? And contractors, and of course, employees and whatnot have to get to it. But there, as the example that Greg was talking about, like in Tampa, it's far away from everything, right?
Yeah.
And trying to get everybody there is really tough. And so you have to adopt these remote access technologies. We think of these things sort of like air gapped. Oh, it's in a little island apart from everything physically, but digitally, everybody has access to it. And that's really the discipline of the mandates that's not working yet, which is that securing access and being able to monitor all of it, right? Because people, they got to get their jobs done. And if they have to get their jobs done, well, they're just gonna drop a mobile hotspot into that network and they're gonna get to it, right? Because it's don't get the job done, don't get paid, or do I get the job done, right? And so this is where, from an IT perspective, what we think we try to help the critical infrastructure companies realize that, hey, you're gonna have to meet these mandates, because NIST 171-800 spells it exactly out as a supply chain what you must do, right? Which is you must authenticate local. That means at the desktop for anybody with privileged access, and you must network multi-factor authenticate everybody else. And it doesn't say just the easy stuff like the web apps, like just MFA, the easy stuff. Don't worry about the hard stuff. And if somebody dropped the network into your, then, well, whatever, right? It doesn't work that way. They're responsible for whatever accesses. And that's the heart of it, is we've got to get a handle on this, because it's not a new thing, right? I mean, we've been talking about ransomware for a really long time. We've been talking about phishing attacks, password attacks, all of these things. We've been talking about them forever. And now for the critical infrastructure, it's showtime, right? It's not glamorous anymore. It's you must respond to these. And so what we try to explain is really trying to figure out how do we consolidate that? How do we figure out a secure access strategy? But at the same time, how do we give the IT the visibility? Right? How can we give them the controls in order to be able to get the visibility so that they can meet these particular mandates? Right. And so our strategy here is what we refer to as passwordless MFA, which is the idea is that especially in these kinds of environments, passwords tend to create a lot of friction.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I, we all experienced this. And we know the bad old days of iPhone 5s when we had to, finger 6-digit codes every single time we got into it. Just slowed us down. And so that's the core of the technology. What we're trying to bring in is smoothing out the authentication process, being able to cross these boundaries, especially DMZ boundaries that are required for critical infrastructure, right? And then do it in a way that can be scaled to be able to match up with sort of the work conditions that these people are working under. So maybe that's a summary of where it comes with us.
I think one of the challenges with it is always the rollout. The first part, first comes regulation, then comes, oh crap, how do we do this? And for so many of the technologies that have brought us security over the past several years, the lift was hard. That was something that was very difficult. I have been through multiple revamps of trying to protect secrets, trying to protect passwords, making them more complicated. I have been around just long enough to see the idea of complicated passwords, short-lived passwords. Now we're kind of cycling back and saying, okay, people should not be changing their passwords that often because they are very bad at making them, and they will just keep appending numbers. This is worse than having a long, complicated password for a very long time. Cool. We're also seeing explosions in the amount. It's not just password. It is a secret problem from people trying to do their jobs, log into their machine, to developers writing code, operations building servers. Now we're building servers with code in a cloud that doesn't actually exist. Cool. That stuff, getting it automated to scale to be able to provide the functionality and do some of these things is incredibly challenging.
Well,
to do it right.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we've spent the last, the first password was like in the 60s or something like that. I mean, we've been investing in that infrastructure because it is significantly easier to implement, because everybody can throw a username password database, some kind of directory on their tool and have it built in. I mean, it's easy. It doesn't have to be encrypted, doesn't have to be anything, doesn't even have to be a database. I mean, it literally can be a text file,
right? And
you can reference that and parse it out. So that's extremely easy. To your point, it's very difficult to put something in place that takes that away. I mean, I think I mentioned it last time, but I had the reporter asking, does the LastPass and LifeLock password manager hack? Is that heralding in a new era of passwordless? Are we going to start? It's like, well, I would say yes if we could flip a switch and turn it on, but it's not easy to implement some of this stuff to get it in there. And especially in critical infrastructure type of technology for manufacturers that have been doing this for 25, 30 years and have never considered that. And now you've got to retrofit that stuff in. So it's not easy. I think maybe that's the point you're trying to make.
Yeah.
But
I think if it was easy, it would have already been solved.
I would hope so, because I would really like to get rid of
if
passwords.
it was cheap, it would also have been solved. And I think that's kind of the interesting part of this is, can we get rid of passwords at the enterprise? Because they're not going anywhere for social media, everything else that we all do individually in our lives.
I kind of
Can I comment to that?
you may be saying the same thing I'm going to say, Don. I wanted to see if we're thinking along the same line.
So the thing is the problem is not passwords. Okay, secrets are an integral part of every business. Okay, the problem is password management. Okay, because the way that we do passwords is we make the user the password manager. They create it and they use it, right, in order to meet the objective, which is identify who they are. Okay. Now, if we can change the way that password management is done, where the user is not the person that's working with passwords, that changes everything. Okay. And so what's the alternative to being able to have a shared secret? Well, we have all of these things, right? We all have these that have biometrics inside of it, which is something you have, something you are in order to be able to verify it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So everybody has this, right? And then we have these things that we can use as alternatives, but that doesn't mean that the password has to go away. And that's really the crux of what the Octopus passwordless MFA is it's a passwordless MFA. And so that's why we don't use the term passwordless. We use passwordless MFA, okay? Because we're eliminating the user use of passwords. They don't create it. They don't type it. They don't know it, okay? But the password in the directory still exists because that's how our applications were built, right? And so what we're doing is we separate the infrastructure from the user so that the user uses these tools in order to be able to authenticate themselves to prove to the Octopus who they are. And then the Octopus controls the rest of the authentication process inside the infrastructure. So I mean, this is a little gimmicky when I say this, but this is a true statement. Passwordless MFA is less. It's less work. It's less overhead for the IT department.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And it's less. It's you don't when you use passwordless MFA, what we're talking about, you don't change the infrastructure. Okay, and we have this demo that I built, which is called Passwordless MFA in an hour. Because of the fact that we abstract all the complexity out of it, you connect our Octopus cloud to your directories on the infrastructure, whether it's on-prem or on our cloud, right? And then we set the configuration, and you can start onboarding users in an hour, right? Because the infrastructure didn't change. You just changed the way that the user authenticates. They have to prove who they are by having something they have and something that they are with a biometric. And then the rest of the system just continues from that perspective. I know that conceptually that's a little bit hard to gather because the conventional wisdom today is especially that passwordless is this PKI structure, which is partially true, but there's a synchronization, right? And
well, I think it's a great point because you don't want to scare people off from it. So we talked about the critical infrastructure. We talked about the challenge. Let's go ahead and get into it. And for those of you on here, Secret Double Octopus is sponsoring this podcast. So I want to give them time to kind of talk through how you approach it. So Don, specifically, I'd also like to talk about how you're doing phishing resistant MFA, because that is something also that Hutch talks about a lot and has given talks on is being able to get around phishing. I mean, we've all got plenty of solutions that push us some kind of code or push us some kind of prompt that says, and it seems pretty strong, right? But then not too long ago, we saw, who was it that was getting hit by just, they done it.
Uber, Twitter.
Yeah, but it was somebody who had a bunch of credential stuffing attack going on, but they had an MFA, so they kept prompting everybody on their phones and just kept just bashing them, just spamming them with these prompts. And somebody finally clicked, yes, let it through, and then it got through. Who was that, Don? I can't remember who that's.
That was an attack. The push bomb attack. Cisco had a major breach associated. That Uber had a major breach associated. Yeah. It's very commonly.
We just talked about it long. Yeah, it was a specific story they'd gone. But regardless, I mean that's a non-phishing resistant, MFA, right? Because I get those from several organizations, several things that I do business with. So why don't you talk about how you guys do it? I know we at Offline talked about the pinning of devices and that kind of thing. And, and some of our customers are also going, well, is password or is phishing resistant only available if you've got, the key, like you were showing a FIDO key, or can you do it in another way? So, because that can be difficult. Nobody wants to go back to the RSA secure ID days where everybody's got a little thing. Yeah. Nothing wrong with RSA. They're a partner, but, I just know how hard that was to keep up with that. And you had to have several people to manage that. So can you go through that, Don?
I remember seeing the founder of Yubico, the wife, not the husband, and she was giving a talk and she was talking about Yubico keys, and she said, "Yeah, you could lose them, so you should buy 2 or 3 of them, right?
Well, yeah.
Great marketing.
That's like a good strategy, right? But
Also, Yubico is also a partner, and we've sold
which is
stuff.
great technology.
Yeah, it's great tech.
Absolutely great. I just thought it was funny that the way that she said it, because they are becoming very affordable, and so it's
Yeah,
really
they are. Yeah.
to do that too. But really, there's the phishing resistance. It's a little bit of complicated area, and first of all, the push bomb attack is a one type of a phishing attack where it uses MFA fatigue. Okay, but there's really two big attack strategies in play today. One of them is the push bomb, and the other is man-in-the-middle attacks. Okay, and they're automated man-in-the-middle attacks using things like evil Gen X malware that everybody has and anybody can get a hold of, right?
Or chat
So,
GPT.
oh, well, he'll figure it out himself, right? Yeah. So the whole concept of phishing resistance goes a little bit past push bombing, where it takes the user out of the equation completely. Okay, because that was part of the issue with push bombing is that you can put all the controls in place, but it still requires a judgment call from a user. Okay, and so we can put more intelligence in place by using adaptive techniques to narrow the gaps of the mistake. Okay, but the concept of phishing resistance is where with the user is completely taken out of the equation. Okay, and that concept first came out, and it was put in the OMB M2209 as a word, phishing resistance, right? And when they talked about it, they were sort of patting themselves on the back, saying, "Look, we're the government. We use PIV and CAT cards, these really expensive things. So we have this PKI infrastructure, so we're phishing resistant." Well, you know what? They're not. Okay, they're using some things, and there's some things missing behind it. But the idea of this phishing resistant is using cryptography in order to be able to match a private and public key, okay, and to be able to do validation. But there's a second element to it, which is the binding, where it's pre your access. You are going to bind yourself to your applications, and what that does is it prevents, if it says only me and the app can talk to this particular application using these particular set of credentials, then the idea of a man in the middle or an attacker that's not me, that doesn't have this key, cannot start the push cycle. Okay, and I know it's a little bit complicated. So it takes a little thinking through to figure this thing out. But the main objective of phishing resistance is that the user is not part of the equation anymore. That this technology does this binding, and that the only way you can answer the challenge is you must have the private key that's embedded in here or embedded in your computer in the TPM. Okay, so but the way that the narrative has developed is that, oh, I have to go get FIDO2 keys, right? And but it's not true. Okay, so we have push technology where we use binding inside of the desktop TPM to the applications, whether it's a web application or a directory application or your desktop or any of these kinds of things, is you can use push technology, and you can use either these UB or FIDO2 keys or these what we call desktop to MFA. I'm sorry, desktop to application pinning. Okay, so that's the fundamental portion of what phishing resistance has. Is it must be it has to be impersonation resistant, replay resistant, and man-in-the-middle resistant, meaning that none of these can work, and it has no behavioral characteristics of a user to make a judgment call. Okay, so yeah, that's a lot, but it's the main thing is once you have it in place, phishing, you've eliminated, well, passwordless MFA with phishing resistance in its essence eliminates the attacker's ability to exploit passwords because the user doesn't know what their password, right? And then the other portion of it is because the mechanics of man in the middle and impersonation go away, it eliminates the phishing attack portion of it. Now, that's a pretty big deal, right?
Well,
especially in the context of ransomware.
Yeah, I mean, I'm giving Greg the side eye here because as an attacker, he's on our pen test team. This both impresses and scares him, I think.
These are things that I generally don't want to find when I'm kind of dealing with it. However, there's also like some interesting elements to when we start talking about passwordless and we start talking about MFA in more places, and it's becoming more common. We more and more on my pen test, I'm dealing with MFA. We're not trying to crack that. Like we might, but we're going to have to put it in a lab to do it because we're not going to try and live attack AWS, Microsoft, Apple, whatever. That's
you
boundary.
don't. Yeah, exactly.
So we take that to the lab, but we start making assumptions of, okay, MFA, what else can I do? And during an attack, during a pen test and simulated exercises, we have boundaries of we're not going to be particularly evil and blast people's phones at 2 o'clock in the morning. However, attackers don't have those kinds of ethics.
No.
They want the 2 o'clock because what they're looking for is that accidental hit. And my thing, having seen pretty much every version of MFA that has come out, the farthest we have come so far, and SDO does this, of the kind of verification of the prompt. So yes, I am who I am. Verify it with the biometrics. This is the thing that's actually asking. That's when you're seeing those little numbers that pop up of, what I like about some of the products is that is also not a subject to attack. Some products
you have
like to
give
you a choice. They show you 3 options. From an attacker, here's what I see. I got a 33% chance of getting this right. When I have to brute a 4-digit number that I know if I enter this more than once incorrectly, it's going to cause bad things. That's going to give me pause. So I like some of the ways some of these things are being implemented. One thing I haven't seen yet on any MFA product is the oops button. That really needs to show up of, I did not mean to authenticate that. The biometrics help, but there still should be a, oops, I did the wrong thing. Please tell IT right now.
Yeah, exactly. Tell me now. Tell
someone.
Send an alert.
And that would be useful for users of, we have to protect them. It's not, darn users. Why are they doing these things? Of our responsibility as practitioners is to protect them from themselves and from attackers.
Yeah, there's like when we do a push with Okta, there's 2 buttons. Yes, that was me. No, that was not me. It's like I could accidentally click the wrong one fairly easily.
The situational awareness, and a lot of our partners and others have kind of the reflexive of, have I seen this before? Have you authenticated from this place before? Are you in the city where you're supposed to be, the network you're supposed to be? Okay, great. Yes or no when you're done. Oh, you're sitting on a VPN, or you're across the country. You're sitting in a hotel room. Please verify this extra bit for us. And that's where we start getting into that tampering and the man-in-the phishing resistant and in the middle resistant, or impossibles, as some of them are. When you start talking about pinning, where now the server is authenticating the client, not just the client authenticating the server, that becomes very difficult to bypass. Am I going to try it? Absolutely. Am I going to succeed? I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, Greg, think about, the verify pushes are really powerful. All of those things are really powerful. They really help, right? But the simple case would be is a phone call to that guy. Hey, we just sent you this 4-digit code over there. This is help desk. Let's just verify what that is. Go ahead and tell me what that is, right? So there's the people factor come into play inside of it is the problem. And have you ever read the report from KnowBe4? They're really a fascinating company. They're a teaching company, right? And they have that annual report. 23 million people went through 1 year of phishing training, and 5% still click.
Still click the button.
It's like,
and that doesn't cost much to get.
For like a decade of that report has been 4.7, 4.8, 4.9, 5%.
It's human. Yeah, absolutely.
It keeps on going. We got to get the people out of it, right?
Humans are definitely, they're the weak link, 100%.
So this is the future. Okay, this is the future. Is that we will, as I said, is at least the user portion of the passwords will be with us for a very long time, especially in the infrastructure. If we can abstract that out, find other ways of bridging things like this, for that infrastructure, we will, over the decades, eventually get rid of passwords, right? Eventually. Well, maybe over the centuries, we'll be able to get rid of the password. But regardless, as I said, that's not the problem. It's not passwords. It's the way that do password management that's the problem. And I'd like you guys to think about that, right? Because there's something wrong with that, right?
100%. Well, Don, we are coming up on time, so we need to cut it short. I really do thank you for being on here. Thank you for Secret Double Octopus sponsoring the podcast. Great partner. Check them out, please. We'll have links to some of the stuff in the show notes when we get this posted. But any parting thoughts before we let you go?
No, I really enjoyed it, and thanks for giving us an opportunity to join your podcast.
Absolutely, we really do appreciate it. Thank you for partnering with us, Greg.
I think if you haven't changed your password in a while, now would be an excellent time to go do so. And then while you're at it, look at some other options while you're there.
I agree. Well, thank you everybody for joining us once again for episode 55. We will see you hopefully in a couple of weeks with episode 56. And until then, everybody change your passwords. All right. Talk to you later, everybody. Thank you.